Museums are so much more than just a collection of artifacts. They also encompass the stories of the people that those collections represent. Back in the summer of 2019, we had the opportunity to hear and record one of those stories. Don Fry was a 15-year-old Philmont staff member in the summer of 1948. And while I can't say his experience is unique to Philmont, I can say it was interesting. Don passed away earlier this week, so we've decided to share part of that interview in this edition of Artifact of the Week.
My name is Don Fry, and in 1948 I was 15 years old and was accepted as a trainee at the Philmont Scout Ranch here. And this was in the summer of 1948. I was a sophomore in high school at that point, and had applied to and been accepted here at Philmont. And they brought us out in the spring of the year for a couple of days of training. Now, at that time, Philmont was using the old Carson Maxwell, and which was Kit Carson's home in Rayado. They housed some of us there while they were teaching us something. I can't remember what. But anyway, we stayed in the old Kit Carson house. The whole back end of this house was falling down and the roof had caved in, but it did have a bed in it that had springs and a mattress. So we weren't sleeping on a tent on the ground, which was, at that time, seemed rather exciting to us, but that gets old real quick. Anyway, that's how we started out at Philmont before we were taken to the camp that we were actually assigned to. The first thing we had to do was bring all the equipment in, because when we first got, there were just the two of us, the experienced guy that we called them Rangers at that time, in charge of a small camp like that, and myself, and a mule skinner with about 4 mules with gear and food and stuff for us to set up Uraka with, along with us. So there were just the 3 of us adults and a string of mules. And I can't recall exactly, but I think we had either 4 or 6 burros. And we had cross-tree saddles on them and kayak boxes, where Rudy had taught us how to throw diamond hitches and pack the mules and the donkeys. But we were carrying all the equipment in and our food. And the equipment we had to have, for instance, we had, I remember, 2 5-pound double-headed axes. Well, we didn't have a sledgehammer. Well, if you've ever worked with a bunch of burros or horses, you know that you either have to put them out to pasture and somehow fasten them, or else you have to keep them in some kind of horse pen. But we didn't have a horse pen at Uraka Cow Camp. All they had was the log building, which was a 1-room building. The Uraka log cabin, the cabin was it. It was empty inside except for a cast iron stove and 2 steel Army surplus separate single spring beds. The floor of the cabin was dirt. It was dust about 2 inches deep. We had no flat boards, nothing flat. There was no table in the cabin. There were no chairs in the cabin. There was nothing to sit on. There was nothing to prepare food or anything. All there was the cabin with a dirt floor. But the cast iron stove at Uraka that was in there was a small cast iron top. It had an oven, but all summer long, in spite of myself, I never was able to build a hot enough fire to even brown biscuits in it. So the oven was useless, but I could put a frying pan and fry bacon on top of it. But anyway, we had no, of course, fresh food because there was no refrigeration on the thing. So we had brought what looked like a week's supply of food for ourselves, and we were supposed to eat with the Boy Scout groups that came through and spent the night at Urraca to supplement the food that we had to eat for ourselves on the thing. So anyway, that was the cabin, and that was our introduction to Urraca. Yes, well, the road from the main camp ended at Crater Lake in 1948. There was no road on up, and Urraca Cow Camp, I might mention, was a small dry camp connected to fishing camp. The road ended at Crater Lake, and so the food that was going to go to fishing camp and supplies like the axe, the single-bitted axe or sledgehammer that I ordered from Rudy the mule skinner on a thing, had to be brought to Crater Lodge on a truck. And that, with the food that was going to fish camp, Rudy would load up and he used kayak boxes and panniers on his mules, but he'd load up several hundred pounds on each one of his mules of these supplies and take off and ride probably all day with his mules to fish camp. And so my first introduction to Rudy was at Crater Lake. I was going to fish camp, and Rudy was going up taking supplies, so we were hiking, and Rudy had his... So that's when I first met him on the thing. Well, subsequently, several times, I ended up at Crater Lake or at fish camp going the other direction when Rudy, he hauled a couple of times a week stuff from Crater Lake to fish camp, and I'd be making the same trip afoot. It comes to my mind on my days off, which we had a day and a half a month of free time, and I'd try to schedule mine so I could catch a bus into Raton and eat ice cream and go to the movie. Anyway, Rudy would be there, and I would help him pack up his mules and go whichever direction he was going and help him with his mules. I don't think I was a lot of help, but it was company for him and company for me on the thing to come or go. So anyway, I learned a little bit about mule skinning from Rudy.
Don's interview was shot by the summer staff of MPS, and I had the honor of asking the questions and guiding the conversation. If you'd like to hear the entire interview, follow the link in the description to our YouTube channel. The interview lasts just a little bit over an hour, but I think it's well worth it. We're also interested in capturing more of these oral and video scouting histories in the future. If you'd like to take part in this project, please let me know. You can send an email to me at harold.white@scouting.org, and we can start the process. Now, just to be clear, these don't have to be just Philmont memories, just good old scouting stories you're willing to share. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Join us next time as we continue to uncover more of the stories and history of the Boy Scouts of America through the collection of the National Scouting Museum and Artifact of the Week.